Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's episode, we are looking at another museum and institution close to our home, the Elgin Museum in Elgin, Illinois, which is talking yet again about NAGPRA and repatriation concerns.
Yep. So yeah, the Elgin Public Museum of Natural History and Anthropology. Dear God, can we please stop making these names so long?
I just also love how natural history usually refers to indigenous, but we're not going to go
Yeah. However, I'm more than happy to include it under the umbrella of anthropology because
there. Yes.
people there, they have the right word in the name. I am more than happy to say that that was always under the anthropology part. Nobody asks questions. Move on.
Let's just not look at the
Uh,
American Museum of Natural History.
yep. Be quiet about that one.
All
But
right.
yes, they have two major exhibits on Native American tribes. They have a massive exhibit on their main floor, which is dedicated to objects of daily life from Native American tribes, and they have a exhibit on their second floor, which is dedicated to the interaction between the European settlers and the Native American tribes. Um, in response to the new changes to NAGPRA laws and the regulations that actually force museums to act on NAGPRA.
Which, pause. NAGPRA is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which was passed in 1990, even though this article incorrectly cites it as 2000. For people who may not be familiar with our usage of the term NAGPRA, it is referring to that specific law. Continue.
Yeah, it is that specific law. Due to recent changes, thanks Dictionary Justin,
Mm-hmm.
to NAGPRA, we we are seeing the Elgin Museum here completely dismantle its entire first floor collection because that is the collection that is dedicated to indigenous peoples in its entirety. And what they are doing is what I honestly consider to be the right move, which is taking everything down and then systematically going item by item and to determine on that item by item basis what is and is not required for repatriation, because that does vary. The new regulations allow for the variation from tribe to tribe.
And it's interesting to me because the museum, while being a small one, claims that it's a monumental task that because they have more than 1,000 objects that need to be reviewed. Again, they've had since 1990, but and
Yeah,
now's the greatest time than ever. And they went on to say that they're a little murky about what exactly constitutes ceremonial objects. And they went on to say that they need a lot of confusion as to everyone's trying to figure it out. And the thing is, they have a lot of issues with this because they don't really have information as from the group that it comes from or the descendant group, so it makes it even more difficult. But they have to make a good faith and honest effort. And the thing is, they have to try and make sure if they are specifically sacred items, and try and work with groups and trying to figure out things. Um, there, there's a couple of things here that I find to be quite interesting and comical in a very sad sense. But they talk about how difficult it is to identify the items being cultural, but then they could also just contact the tribes who lands we live on and try and go that way because hey, Illinois now has tribal lands after the Prairie Band of Potawatomi ended up repurchasing their former tribal lands, which we did a video on. And the other interesting thing is all the human remains in the collection were sent down to the Illinois State Museum for DNA testing, and they also have a massive backlog there, which they claim is enormous.
yeah. And one of the good things that does come from that list of rather unfortunate statements is is that the Prairie Band Potawatomi they are willing to help the museum go through its collection, and the museum is willing to let them help. and that's very good. It's nice to see the museum actually, letting the tribal authorities in on these processes, but also the simple fact that the Elgin Museum here acknowledges that during their entire history they have no point of contact for any tribal authority, despite having two separate major exhibits on tribal life and history, is incredibly disappointing. Like the fact that they needed the Prairie Band to come into Illinois and reestablish itself this very year in order to have any contact with a tribal authority is deeply disappointing.
I
And it
know I can only speak from personal experience, but a lot of tribes are more than willing and more than happy to try and give answers and try to be there. However, on that same token and notion, a lot of tribal historic preservation offices are massively underfunded and overworked.
yeah, yeah,
But there's a statement at the end of this article that doesn't necessarily sit the best with me, and I know part of it has to do with the author of the article trying to stir up thought and trying to provoke thought, but also the fact that the museum itself commented on it. Of new regulations requiring the return of so many items raises another issue as well. Without the artifacts, how do you illustrate and educate people on Native American history? And there is a very, very easy way that people do not like talking about. And we just did a video on it actually talking about King Tut, where you create photorealistic, accurate replicas of certain objects. You don't need to necessarily have them on display, especially if they're ceremonial. And depending on, and this does vary tribe to tribe, I will respectfully give them that. Some tribes are willing to let you show a replica on display so long as it's not the actual specific ceremonial or sacred item.
in fact, the Elgin Museum, this article earlier is somewhere deep in the bog of the middle of it, acknowledges the Elgin Museum does in fact already do this, as they own two peace pipes, both of which are on display only because they are replicas and are not in fact actual original peace pipes that were made or used by any Native American. In fact, they are replicas that were made by other Europeans.
So it's amazing to me how these institutions can sit there, one, 34 years after the law has been passed. 34 years. And then they
Yeah.
turn around and go, "We're in a crisis. We don't know what to do. We can't handle all this." Well, in reality, if you followed the letter of the law for the past 34 years, this wouldn't have been an issue, one. And two, if you just contacted tribes, if you just included them, it makes things so much easier. And then three, you have the answer sitting in front of your face. You have it right in front of you.
Yeah,
You
they do
literally,
have.
do you need me to take it and just whack it upside your head and go, "Hey,
Honestly, Justin, honestly, Justin, personally, I think the Elgin Museum is far less worthy of any of the anger we may have regarding the failure of, shall we say, the enforcement of NAGPRA, simply because at the moment when NAGPRA became enforceable, they did as far as they could the right thing, which is take everything down and systematically examine it with the help of an indigenous tribe. So many other institutions are refusing to even go that far.
I agree, but I disagree. I agree that
Should this have been done 34 years ago? Yes.
100%. It shouldn't have been until an indigenous woman became the Secretary of the Interior to change the guidelines that all these institutions are now struggling to get through. One. And two, there is our whole field, our entire field is muddied down, and we go through in every single class, in every single level of our education, talking about ethics, talking about morale, or moral, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting the two
Um,
mixed up, but
no.
morals.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Morel is a baseball player.
No, talking about ethics and morals and how they apply to museology and museum studies. And I can tell you every step of the way they talk about ethics. And the fact that this was neglected so long, it truly is beyond boiling my blood, to the point where I don't even want to give these smaller institutions credit because they willfully and intentionally avoided going through this and just kicked that can down the road. And now they're biting themselves in the rear over this. And it just, I find it frustrating because I work with tribes. I've gone through and I've made those connections. I have gone through and done the work. I have done repatriation on behalf of institutions because they could not do it themselves.
Yeah. And honestly, Justin, like this is a good breakup point, and like you can tell us in the comments who you think
Oh,
is like, should we befall the like wrath of archaeologist heaven on these on all these institutions for the 34 years of neglect, or should we uh should we simply ignore the ones that are doing it right now to focus all of our energy on all the institutions that have the gall to try and fight this law now that it is coming with enforceable
teeth.
countermeasures against them, because there are so many institutions that are actively resisting this.
I think this
And
is a form of resistance, and that's where I think you and I are differing, and we can leave
well,
that to the comments. But I
we can
think
leave
there
that to the
was.
comments, but like the ones that are actively trying to avoid repatriation now, or the ones who, the moment they could no longer get away with it, surrendered? Who
All
is
I'm
more worthy of our fight?
all I'm saying is the ones who have already did. And we'll end the video there. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.